Welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck, and I am here today to talk to you about my top 10 books of 2021. Now, this is only going to be fiction, novels, and novellas. I'm going to have separate videos for nonfiction, poetry, and graphic novels. This is technically 11 books, but one of them are tied for a position, so this is what I've got. At spot number 9, no, that's not how numbers work. At spot number 10, I have Depart by Kern. This is a novella focusing on a trans guy who has just been through a hurricane. So he's having to convene at this sports center, I'm sure there's a better word for that, sports arena, with a bunch of other people who are impacted by this. As he's dealing with all of this, he's also starting to see the ghost of his great-grandfather who escaped from Nazi Germany. So throughout this, you have discussion of queerness, Jewish identity, and also a lot about community. You know, he makes connections with people who are there and also has issues with different people who are there. This takes place in Texas, which is going to be really important because of how the people in here act. Being trans and Jewish in a catastrophe like this in Texas is going to be very different than being trans and Jewish in a catastrophe in, like, California. I really, really loved how a lot of these themes were handled. I also really enjoyed getting to learn about Jewish traditions and beliefs regarding ghosts and things like that, because that was kind of a big part since he was seeing his great-granddad. The main complaint that I have about this book is that I wanted it to be longer. I wanted more. It leaves off on a place that, like, there could definitely be a sequel. I don't think there's one in the works, but I would like to read more about these characters. But this was really well done and really, really relevant. I mean, the whole reason that the hurricane happened and that hurricanes are happening more now is global warming. And also part of the really big issue that the characters encounter is that a lot of the people, or at least a loud portion of the people in this arena, are transphobic and racist and all of that, and have access to guns because it's Texas. And that was scary, but also, like, in kind of a real way, because Tennessee is not far off from that. But this was very good, and I'm very excited to read the next thing that they put out. At spot number 9, I have All Systems Red by Martha Wells, and this is another shorter book. The main character of this book is a robot who was originally made to be a murder for hire, but this robot hacks its own system so that it has more of a choice in what it's doing, and it learns more about people. It watches the entertainment feed, so that kind of colors what they decide to do from there. It's currently on a mission with a group of researchers who are going on this new planet. So this has a lot to say about, like, sentience is a bad word, but, like, humanity, and also, I think in this, you get bits and pieces looking at, like, trauma response. You also, this is definitely critiquing capitalism. This is very good, and I think that I'm gonna have stronger feelings once I actually get through the series. I'm not sure how many are in this, but this is a pretty sizable series, and I think most of them are about that long. Watch me be completely wrong, but I really liked this, and I'm super excited to see where the series goes, because there's a lot of really cool stuff that could be done thematically with this. You know, I'm a liar. I don't have 11 books. I have 12. Because one of them I don't have in physical form. This one that I don't have, I think I'm going to say ties for spot number 8. So the first book that I have in slot number 8 is Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. I listened to this on audiobook earlier this year, and it's the prequel to The Hate You Give. This focuses around the main character in The Hate You Give, Star, her dad. But you basically get his story. He's the son of a gang leader and is trying to do his best for his family when he ends up getting somebody pregnant. So in this, he's navigating relations with the gang, trying to kind of formulate his own life, and the fact that he's going to be a dad. And I really liked a lot of things about this. I didn't really know very much of what to expect. I liked The Hate You Give, but it's been a while since I read it. But I was really impressed with the fact that this tackled teen dads, because even I think teen parenthood in general doesn't get written about a ton, but when it does get written about, or at least I haven't read very much about it, there's probably a whole subgenre that I'm missing. But when you do get to hear about teen parents, it's always teen moms. And not really as much of a focus on teen dads. So this was, I think, a really interesting and important perspective. I think some of it resolved more smoothly than would be realistic, but I think that's to be expected from some YA to a certain extent. I likely had more on my mind about it closer to when I read it, but I remember really enjoying it. I sat and listened to it all in a day, just because it was a really engaging story. So I would definitely recommend it. If you liked The Hate You Give, definitely give the prequel a go. I'm actually kind of surprised that I didn't see more people talk about it, considering how big The Hate You Give is. But the other book that is has a place in number 8 was another book that was released in 2021. And that is The Passing Playbook by Isaac Fitzsimons. This is another book that I read all in one day. This is about a trans boy, Spencer, who just transferred to a new school and is stealth because of some things that happened at his old school. However, he wants to be on the soccer team. But in order to be on the soccer team, he has to have his birth certificate matching the gender of the team that he plays for. On top of all of this, he is falling for one of the other guys on the team. So this deals with a lot of important and really timely issues. All throughout the country, there were a lot more anti-trans laws passing this year, most of them targeting trans youth. Sports and other co-ed areas like locker rooms and stuff like that was a really big place that was hit. In my state in particular, Tennessee was one of the worst with laws like this passing, just complete bullshit. So this is really important, I think, especially because it addresses this issue, but ultimately, while he does encounter some hardships, it is not nearly as disgusting as some displays are. I guess it's nice to see the amount of support that he does have. There's also important representation in that this main character transitioned early, started hormonal treatment early. He's on puberty blockers. I don't think that it said that he was on but the big thing is that he's on puberty blockers. I'm not sure I can think of another young adult novel, or any novel for that matter, that I've heard of with that being discussed. Another big thing that this hits on is coming out, and how different people have different experiences with coming out, especially depending on how welcoming and affirming their parents are. The difference between the love interest's experience of coming out and the main characters is very, very different. And so that's kind of more important discussion that I really loved seeing. And like I said, it was very engaging. I sat and stayed up really late finishing it. And it's also worth noting, too, that, I don't generally read sports-related things. I think the only other sports book that I've really read is probably Anna on the Edge, which I also really liked. So maybe I should read sports ones, even though I don't know a thing about a sport. But regardless, this was very good. Definitely recommend it. For spot number 7, I also have 2 books. The first was The Ghosts We Keep by Mason Deaver. This is Mason Deaver's second novel. Their first was I Wish You All the Best, which I adored. This also has a non-binary main character, but this one is focused on grief. The main character recently lost their brother in a car crash, and he's dealing with that, and the rest of their family is dealing with that. This is all told from the main character Liam's perspective, which was an excellent narrative choice. Partly because, like, you're seeing, obviously, their grief, but you're seeing other people's grief through their lens, which I also think is important. Just because it's really easy to overlook other people's grief in your own. It's also really easy to, I guess, make certain assumptions. Like this, to a certain extent, does talk about, like, how different people grieve. One of the interesting things about this is that it's told non-linearly. It kind of goes back and forth to when Ethan, the brother, is alive, then back. This also talks a lot about friendship and dealing with life and change, especially when something big like this happens. This was just a very honest, raw look into the grieving process. And, you know, despite not having dealt with or not having the exact same kind of response to grief, I still felt connections to certain aspects of this, which sounds really vague, and I would go into it, but there are spoilers, and I'd end up crying, and nobody wants that. So overall, this was very good. An excellent look into grieving, as well as friendship and family dynamics to a certain extent. My other book that I have that tied for 6th is Muted by Tami Charles. And this book is actually told in verse. And so it's all poetry. I think this was the first book that I finished this year that wasn't nonfiction or a graphic novel. And it was really incredible. This is another one that I'm really surprised more people haven't talked about. Like, I guess I'm not that surprised because I guess people are less inclined to pick up novels in verse. But this was really great. I picked this up expecting it to be like kind of a hard-hitting book because it's about this girl who's in a band with her friends. She gets seen by this big-time musician, and you're kind of seeing kind of the dark side of the music industry. So I knew that it would deal with tough issues, probably some like friendship problems and stuff like that. And it kind of starts out looking like it would be, you know, something looking at like relatable teen issues, but it develops into kind of a thriller or horror, really, I think would be closer. Not in that, not, I guess, the traditional genre or whatever, but the stuff that ends up going on, it's just really horrifying. This book has one of the most, like, utterly repulsive bad guys. Like, I'm not sure I've wanted to hurt a character more than I wanted to hurt the, like, bad guy in this. And the thing that makes him, I think, so repulsive is partly because you can't really see it, or a lot of people don't see it. And the fact that there are a lot of people who are actually like him make it, like, so particularly disgusting. So that was really great writing, especially to be able to feel all of that. Like, again, this is written, like, in verse, and I mean, I personally really like poetry, and I think that it can give definitely something extra emotionally. But you're also getting all of this from the perspective of somebody who's in the middle of all of it, who doesn't see everything wrong that's going on up until a certain point. And yet, pretty early on, I felt homicidal towards this man. So this was just really excellent writing, especially since this is all like from her perspective. So you get to hear what other people say to her, but you're still seeing this all come from somebody who, refused to see it. So, both of these books are really emotionally intense about slightly different things. So you'll want to check out content warnings for both of these, which I put in my story graph reviews, if you wanted to check those out. Coming in at spot number 6, I have One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This was the only romance genre book that I read, but I really loved this. I didn't really know how much I was gonna like it. I knew that it was really hyped, so I was a little bit weary, but I read it. I actually buddy read this with Brent from Rad Reads, and it was so good. Like, y'all probably already know the premise. August has just moved to New York and falls in love with this girl on the train. New outfit, new lighting, because technology is homophobic, and deleted half of my footage. So here we are several days later. I think I was getting into the synopsis of One Last Stop. In this, August has just moved to New York. She doesn't really expect to find lasting connections and people just in general, so she certainly didn't expect to find really great roommates or fall in love with the girl on the train. She ends up getting wrapped into a mystery when she figures out that the girl is actually stuck on the train from the 1970s. I absolutely loved this. I adored Jane Sue, love interest. I really loved the focus on friendship in here. There were a lot of aspects that were cheesy, but it was really great. It was heartwarming. It was well written. I also really loved how history was used in this. Like I said, Jane is from the 1970s, and I can't say because it's a spoiler, but there is a specific event that is used in the book that is an actual event that doesn't get talked about very much. So I really loved that they decided to use that event as a central piece. Hopefully some people actually look it up. If you've read this book before and you haven't looked up the event that they mention, definitely go do that. Actually, if you look, I have a whole TBR of gay history books, and one of the books is specifically a book about that event. So if you've read this and want to learn more about the event, there is at least one book that exists about it. But anyways, I really loved this. I don't really read a lot of genre romance, so I was surprised that I liked it so much. And I guess I need to get to reading Red, White, and Royal Blue. I'm a little bit scared because I don't think it's going to be as good as this, but we'll see how that goes. The next book that I have is An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. This is a sci-fi book that is set in a spaceship far in the future, but it's tiered like the antebellum South. So the people on the top level are really rich. They get to do all manner of things, use up a lot of the energy, and then the people in the lower decks are enslaved in various degrees, and it's all race-coded as well. You have the white people on the top and the black people on the bottom. The main character of this is one of the people who lives in the lower decks, but is the assistant to the main surgeon on the ship. Her name is Aster, and you're going through and kind of seeing her story. Part of this is her figuring out what exactly happened when her mother died. I really loved this.
There were so many different layers to the commentary. First of all, obviously there's like historical commentary, but I also think that it applies to a lot of stuff contemporary as well. Aster, the main character, is also neurodivergent. I don't think that they explicitly say that she's autistic because that language doesn't exist, but it's pretty clear that that's what's going on. Similarly, they don't have the language of non-binary or trans, but it's also very clear that Aster's non-binary. She actually gets top surgery, she mentions in here, and obviously doesn't call it top surgery, but that's something that kind of happened before the story takes place. I think that it's also pretty clear that, I won't say which character because spoilers, but there's at least one character that I think is also very obviously trans feminine or is coded as gender variant to some degree. So there's a lot of really neat things in here about gender and sexuality, a lot of commentary on race, as well as climate. It took me a little while to get into it, honestly, but my brain hasn't exactly been on doing its best in general. But once I got into it, with the help of the audiobook, it was just really great. I didn't want to put it down, and I wanted more. It's kind of one of those things where you finish the book, and then suddenly you realize you have absolutely no clue what the fuck to do with yourself. Like, there's just no more, and you just have to just sit there and live with that for a little bit. I really loved this and would highly recommend it. Really, I struggled trying to figure out where exactly to place this within this stack because it's so well done. I feel like it could be higher, but I think that's always the struggle with tiered lists like this. Book number 4 on my list is Drag King Dreams by Leslie Feinberg. I have sung Leslie Feinberg's praises an awful lot, so it should come as no surprise that one of their books is going to be near the top of my list. Stone Butch Blues gets a lot more recognition, understandably so. It's a highly important book, and says a lot of really important things about the lesbian community and the queer community at large. In a lot of ways, Drag King Dreams is a follow-up to Stone Butch Blues. It doesn't use the same characters, there's not the same storyline. However, it is kind of another dive into the queer community, specifically looking at what was going on immediately post 9/11. This is set in New York, which is extremely relevant since it's looking at kind of the attitudes post 9/11. And there's a really huge focus on community, and some of that is generally speaking like within the trans community, within the LGBT community, also within other communities. It specifically talks about discourse within and also solidarity within the Jewish community, as well as the community of a specific part of New York. Like with a lot of other things that Leslie Feinberg has written, this has a really huge focus on solidarity, and the fact that people are going to have disagreements regarding like how people identify, who is struggling more than who, or other things like that. But when it comes right down to it, ultimately we have to come together in order to fight the systems that are oppressing us, because we have way more in common than we have different. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you are engaging in any sort of queer discourse on the internet, you need to read Leslie Feinberg. Especially if you're white, especially if you're cis. Go out and read it. Trans Liberation is nonfiction and it's shorter than Stone Butch Blues or Drag King Dreams, so this is also a good option. But anyways, this was very good. It takes a deep dive, like I said, in community, also identity, and connection, and also burnout, like activist burnout. It takes a deep look at transphobia, homophobia, anti-Semitism, and xenophobia. Hate crimes play a really prevalent role in this, so know that going in. Someone does die pretty soon on in the beginning of this. So keep that in mind while you're reading it. But I really, really got a lot out of this book. And it's incredibly important. So I highly recommend it. Book number 3 on my list is Iron Widow by Xiran Zhao. And this was just so good. This is a YA sci-fi fantasy that is in this world inspired by ancient China. But within this world, people are fighting aliens. In order to fight these aliens, they're in these mech suits, and in order for the mech suits to function, 2 people have to be in it. The men are the primary pilots, and the women are concubine co-pilots. So they're used to pilot the machine more as batteries than actual pilots, and are very much objectified and abused within the system the world has set up. The main character, Zeyn's sister, ends up deciding to become a concubine co-pilot and is murdered by the man who she was supposed to pilot with. So, Zeyn decides to become a concubine co-pilot under him as well so she can murder him. That's where the story starts, but it goes a lot of places really quickly. I fucking loved this book. I actually started out, I was borrowing the book, and part of the way through, I just knew that I needed my own copy. I didn't tab it, I guess, a ton, but I usually don't tab my fiction at all. But I knew that I would want to revisit it and have my own copy. The main character is justifiably profoundly angry. And I think that in a lot of these sort of like dystopian bits where we have the female protagonist, if they do come in with a lot of anger, at some point in the story, I feel like anger is seen as like something bad, or they figure out like why they shouldn't be as angry, or the anger just goes away. That absolutely does not happen in this. Her anger gets redirected in a way that is less suicidal, but her rage is never tampered or not taken seriously by the people who matter. Like, people who discredit her are not the people, I guess, that you're rooting for or you think are correct in the story. Another really wonderful thing about this is that there is a triad. So she is in a relationship with 2 other people. They're all in a relationship with each other. And the way that this was built was really awesome. Even though this is told from Zeyn's perspective, you could still see the relationship forming in with the other 2 people, and I loved it. It absolutely warmed my heart. I was really disappointed when I went on AO3 and there was no Iron Widow fanfiction. I mean, granted, I did read it like immediately after it released, but I still think that it's rude that no one had put up any fanfiction a la chapter 39. I will say that I did technically have criticism of the book. The last, like, maybe quarter of the book is really rushed, but when I read that, I only thought about that after I was done reading it. While I was reading it, I simply did not care. I wanted to know what was going on, and I really need the sequel immediately. So while there are technical things that I could like point out about the book, I simply did not care about any like technical stuff that you could pick apart, because the book was that like entertaining and just amazing otherwise, which is why it's in spot number 3. My second favorite book of 2021 was Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters. This is literary fiction that focuses primarily on 2 trans women. It's also told in 2 different timelines. In one timeline, you see these 2 women, Amy and Reese, as they are going through their relationship. They're starting to date. The other timeline is several years later. Amy has detransitioned and is now Ames and has gotten his boss pregnant. but can't really handle the idea of fatherhood in a lot of different ways. So he calls up Reese to potentially co-parent with them. This book is full of profoundly messy people. And that's one of the things that I just really loved about this. I think both of the main characters are very, very messy in their own right. Reese in a much louder, kind of self-destructive way, and Ames in a much more dissociative kind of way, or I guess like more avoidant than anything else. I don't know. I had so many thoughts about this book, and I actually originally read it for a reading vlog that I never posted because I lost some of the footage, and I was so pissed. I had so much to say about this book, and I have talked about it in previous videos, but this was just really incredible. There was so much that I was able to pull from it, and I feel like doing a reread, I would get even more. It says so much, like you can pull stuff just from the characters, but it also says a whole lot about community, the trans community specifically, and also womanhood and motherhood more broadly. And with this book, I feel like there were also some technical things that I could technically criticize, but with the way that the characters were, like the kind of, like, again, messy is the word that comes to my head. I'm sure there's a better word. But I feel like the little bits that were a little bit clunky made sense. Like, it felt very cohesive still. I don't know if the author intentionally did those things or not, but if they were intentionally done, I would totally believe it because it all felt like it made sense. So, I really, really loved this and got a lot out of it. I will say, if you haven't read that much fiction by trans people, or if you don't know that much about trans people, I would not have this be the first book that you read. I just don't know what it would be like for like an uninformed cis person. Like, I don't know how confusing it would be. I feel like a lot of the like inner community conversations they're having in here, I just don't know if this would be a good like introduction. Not that it's supposed to be by any stretch of the imagination, but I was seeing a lot of people read this because it was long listed for the Women's Prize, I think. And I was kind of curious about that because I feel like there are a lot of things in here that would kind of go over people's heads if they weren't really informed about that. Like I said, I don't think that it was supposed to be an introduction and shouldn't be expected to be, but if you haven't read any trans literature before, maybe don't start with this. But I fucking loved it, and it was one of my absolute favorites of the year. Finally, my favorite book, or favorite novel, of 2021 was The 30 Names of Night by Zeyn Joukhadar. This is the story of a closeted Syrian American trans boy. He is grieving the loss of his mother and living with his grandmother. He's also an artist and dealing with kind of a like writer's block. I'm sure there's a painter-specific version of that term, but it's not in my head right now. So he's going through trying to figure out some things about this bird that his mother swore that she saw. He, I think, is wanting to do a project around it. And he finds this diary of an artist who was really, really prominent in the community and up and disappeared. So as you're going through his story, you're also getting to read her journal, the artist's journal. And she immigrated, I think, in the 30s and is queer. So you're getting two different queer stories from different times within the same community. So obviously themes of community and queerness are really big. Also family, gender and sexuality, loss. It is so fucking beautiful. Like, from a technical standpoint, this is the most beautiful book that I've read this year. I have no knowledge of Zeyn Joukhadar publishing any poetry, but they clearly should be publishing poetry because this was fucking beautiful. I think I mentioned just a minute ago that I don't tab fiction very much, but this one got lots of post-its because there were so many sections that were just incredible. And so with that, I think I'm going to read just some sections of this. If we live, it's only because some distant galaxy lent us its dust for a while. Ghosts are more honest than the rest of us. They can't help but be what they are. You taught me that revelation has a price in a world that prefers the comfort of closed eyes. Maybe that's why I'm still convinced that the painter you loved left an echo of herself behind here, waiting to be heard. And then this quote is from about halfway through the book, and they're talking about gender. In the early part of the 20th century, homophobes and eugenicists joined forces to study what they called inversion, an early term for homosexuality, gender nonconformity, and transness. They believed that they would read and police queerness on the body. Maybe this is why I don't want to make myself legible. I want to erase the meanings that have been ascribed to my breath, to my sweat, to my hair and fat and skin. I trace the green veins on my neck that branch down into my breasts as feathers. I'm painting myself as the bird that, to the world outside this room, does not exist. I draw myself clothed in wings and tell myself that even the angels are sexless. There are a lot of other sections that I want to read, and I keep just reading and rereading pieces. But this was incredible. I cried because of sadness. I cried because of joy. It was just fucking perfect, honestly. So those are my top novels and novellas of 2021. I plan on making a video looking at graphic novels, poetry, and then nonfiction. So you can expect to see that at some point. But that is all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye.